we've talked about the ACA ad nauseum around here for years, in terms of like what's good about it, and what's bad about it. What's good about it? Patient protections. That was really essential, so that when you get insurance, we basically have a minimum standard for what we consider to be health insurance. We don't call a car that has no engine a car. Can't go out and sell that and say, well, you bought the car. The other part of the ACA that was good was the expansion of Medicaid. You had 10, 11 million people or so, maybe a little more, get Medicaid to get health insurance for the first time. And it is available to anyone who makes 138% or less of the poverty line. And the way that this worked was states, because the Supreme Court essentially said the federal government, for whatever reason, cannot mandate the expansion of Medicaid. Originally, that was the plan. We give you more money. We give you about 90% of the costs for the first, or we give you close to 100% of the costs first year or two. And then after that, we pick up 90% of the cost. And you got to take the expansion because you're already doing the existing Medicaid now. We're just covering a bigger cohort of people. And the Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. And people were shocked by that ruling. Nevertheless, it stands. And so you have still 12 Republican-controlled states in the country that do not have Medicaid expansion. So in this stimulus bill, the COVID-19 relief bill, the Democrats wrote into the bill that not only will you have to pay nothing to expand Medicaid, this applies to literally millions of people. Millions of people would get Medicaid expansion if these 12 holdout states agreed to it. And so instead of saying, not only did they say you don't have to contribute a dime to Medicaid, they actually basically said, we're going to pay you almost double the cost of it. So it's going to cost you $100 to cover everybody in your state on Medicaid. Obviously not $100. I'm using this as an example. It's going to cost you $100. We're going to give you $200. You're going to make money by, not as a knock-on effect of covering your citizens of your state, because you're going to save money in a myriad of ways because they're getting good health care or decent health care, depending on the availability of it. You're going to actually make money. We're going to pay you extra money to take this money to provide health care. And all of them have said no. Every single one of these Republican-led states have said no. They don't have an excuse anymore. They just started a story where they just focused on the Mississippi governor, because I guess he was the most recent one to say, to announce that he would be not taking the money. Listen to this. It would cover. There are 2.2 million people in those 12 Republican states who could get health insurance. In Mississippi, it would be 200 to 300,000 people in the state would be eligible. There was the COVID-19 relief bill will give them $600 million over 2 years to expand Medicaid. 60% of those people who would gain health insurance as a result of Medicaid expansion in Mississippi would be people of color. The vast majority of those people are Black. The Medicaid expansion would cost $290 million, but they're offered $600 million.
But Sam, isn't that about it's not about actually solving the problem. That's just their excuse that they can't afford it.
Well, they can't say that they don't.
They don't have an excuse anymore.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's just their excuse.
That was their excuse, but now it's like we can't afford to get an extra $310 million.
That's
what he says is, in fact, there was a Senate Public Health Committee Chair, Hob Bryant, a Democrat, in Mississippi said that there will be more money in the state treasury if we expand Medicaid. If we don't, for a number of years, the federal government's been offering us $1 million a day to take care of sick people. Now they're offering us $1 million a day to take that other $1 million a day. You can't make this stuff up. But yet the governor my position has not changed. I'm opposing expanding Medicaid in Mississippi because they just don't believe it's good for people to get government run healthcare. I mean,
and also the Mississippi state that you listed, like if there's a disproportionate amount of poverty and it's there seems to be with their Black constituents, they're just genuinely not interested in helping them because those aren't the people that vote for them. And they can ride racism and Republican identity to the polls for victory for the foreseeable future. So it's just like, they're not interested in helping people. What's the incentive?
I mean, it really does seem to be like racism at this point, because I was actually talking to a public health official in South Carolina last week, and she was talking to me about like how, she talked to legislators in the state on both sides, and they're basically saying there's no way we're going to expand Medicaid even before this. And it was her, I believe, that like it's a holdover from this being part of Obama still, like that this could be the case.
Well, I don't know if yes, it's racism, but it's also for-profit insurance companies. If you can see just a little here, that's the slow move into Medicare.
But Medicaid's managed by for-profit companies.
For-profit companies, you're right.
Yeah, I really just think at a certain point, they want to punish Black people for being sick and being poor. And there's like this tension. Sorry?
Yes, and. I mean, Mississippi is the poorest state in the union. I think it's yes, and there's something else. Like, that's always, I think, the root. But
yeah. Well, they make active decisions to remain at the bottom of the country in education, at the bottom of the country in terms of, quality of life and poverty, or I guess wealth, I guess. They choose to kind of subjugate primarily Black citizens in their state, and they don't really care or see them as a part of the active constituency that they need to serve.
And I would say, I think also the calculation is this. I mean, there's a lot of data that suggests that people on Medicaid don't tend to vote as much as other people, largely because they're probably in districts where there's less polling booths, and that they can't take time off from work, or whatever those reasons are. But I would imagine, despite that, the calculation is whatever number of new voters happen to get engaged and vote because they're getting health care and their lives are made somewhat more easier. May not be that many, but the majority of them are not going to vote for me. And I think that's basically what it comes down to. They know that those folks, by and large, are not going to vote for them, and they're just willing to screw them. And it is just what is even more reprehensible is that they're not, and maybe it's just not well publicized in Mississippi. People don't know the issue, but it is just sort of stunning that they're just not in any way like face the electoral consequences for this. I mean, it's
also an us versus them, like old school Southern mentality that it's hard for sometimes, I think, people in the North to understand. I mean, my sister did a ton of great work. She went to the biggest prison. Now I'm blanking on it. She was anyway, my stepsister and my sister have both done work with prison projects in Louisiana too. And you just kind of see the like old school slavery mentality that has just permeated and still remains. And I think Mississippi would be similar in that area. God, why can't I remember the name of that prison?
Do you know what other states there were?
Angola. She did some work covering that, and my stepsister works for the Innocence Project, and it's just like hard to overstate how intensely us versus them and just removed white people are down there from really experiences of Black people in many ways.
Well, and I mean, the reality is that it also will affect poor white people in the South.
Without doubt.
So it is pitting people against each other, but one's going to point at the other.
I mean, if you look at, all you need to do is go back and look at sort of those Jim Crow era laws that kept people from voting. They were perfectly fine with we will disenfranchise some poor white people too, who may be illiterate or may not be able to pay the poll tax. I'm talking now over 100 years ago, 140 years ago or so, but that was the plan. Hasn't changed too much. I don't know.
Well,
What is their position on this, though? Like, what justification is there to not expand this? And there's interest that in these states that would want to expand
Dude,
it,
you don't
including
want
insurance
the,
and hospital groups.
You don't
who
want the
are
safety net to
incredibly
be
powerful.
a hammock. You don't want the safety net to be a hammock.
You don't want feeders to be fed, because that's how they look at people, as excess feeders, honestly. Like,
So-
Yes.
Luke Mayville did the work in Idaho to expand it by a ballot initiative. And it was very, Michael was out there. It was a very inspiring process, because people were like, yeah, I don't think people should go without health care. They passed that, and the Republicans, even though they got bipartisan support to pass, Republicans fought it legally and even tried to do lawfare on Luke Mayville, saying he did some sort of election fraud stuff. So these are psychos. Republicans in state governments are absolute psychos who think hungry or poor people should be hungry.
They
just
they
fed
want to
into the
make it as
pressure,
easy.
basically.
Sorry, Brendan.
Nothing.
No, they want to make it as easy as possible for Black people to die. They really they have a resentment against them that's baked in Republicans in power there. And
even in Idaho, it's even poor people. They just think do not procreate if you're poor. You should not have the money or material sort of comfort to reproduce yourself.
Well, this is, we talked about, we've been talking about this for years. I mean, this is why Donald Trump did so well on that stage, because it's the inverse of that, of that doctrine, right? If you're poor, you're morally reprehensible. You're in the wrong. You're poor because of you've made mistakes and you deserve what you get. But if you're rich, then you're rich because of you, and you are morally to be applauded, and you are righteous, and you are in the know. And that's why Donald Trump gets up on that debate stage with all the other Republicans, and it's just there's nothing they can say. Everything he says trumps, forgive the pun, because he's a rich guy, and that's what they have been. That is their whole political philosophy.
Isn't there some sort of legal pushback? I mean, if they do make it so clearly racist, I mean, there's got to be some sort of federal. I'm just very curious about where this goes. And then yeah, I mean, not accepting the funds, putting people. No, there's nothing there.
It's just a straight on. You can't.
Is it?
I mean, this is. Is
it just southern states though, or is it?
Well, there's 12 states. I mean, they're the Republican ones. I would imagine the vast majority of them are Republican. Off the top of my head, I don't know which ones they are, but this is the argument why you must federalize these things. Instead of you give the money to the states you make this a federal program. They have no participation in deciding whether they're eligible any more than they do whether people are eligible for Social Security. That's just basically the bottom line.